Fought in the closing days of 2 BBY, the Battle of Atollon was one of the most strategically significant engagements of the early rebellion, and represented a serious escalation in what would become the Galactic Civil War. Having gathered intelligence to indicate a coordinated Alliance attack on the vital shipyard world of Lothal, Grand Admiral Thrawn of the Imperial 7th Fleet put forward a plan to his superiors, which attempted to take advantage of this situation by ambushing the 2 rebel cells participating in the attack as they prepared to depart their staging ground. Using the trajectory of a mobile Alliance fleet, as well as an intercepted transmission from a captured rebel spy, Thrawn was able to locate the rebel staging ground above the planet Atollon and assembled his forces to attack the system. Arriving over the planet, Thrawn's force, consisting of 6 Imperial-class Star Destroyers, 2 Architect-class light cruisers, and 2 interdictor vessels, assumed a battle line in low orbit of Atollon. The Alliance forces present at the time comprised the entirety of the rebel Phoenix fleet under the flag of Commander Sato's Phoenix Home, as well as a large portion of General Jan Dodonna's Massassi group, commanded from the bridge of the Nebulon B frigate Vanguard. Upon realizing the size and composition of the Imperial fleet, the Alliance commanders present quickly decided to begin a full-scale evacuation of the Atollon system, in the hopes of preserving as many of their vessels as possible, but their attempts to flee were thwarted by Thrawn's use of interdictor vessels, and it became clear that rebel forces would need to disable or destroy both Imperial interdictors before any escape would be possible. Having cut off the rebels' primary avenue of escape, Imperial forces began to quickly tighten their grip around the Alliance defense fleet, swiftly destroying a Nebulon B frigate that had been caught out of position attempting to retreat. On the surface of Atollon, Captain Hera Syndulla of the Phoenix Cell quickly devised a plan to summon reinforcements from the Alliance command center on Yavin 4. She led the entirety of her surface-based fighter wing into orbit, accompanied by the Gauntlet-class attack ship Nightbrother. The Nightbrother, piloted by Lieutenant Commander Ezra Bridger, was tasked with escaping the system to contact Alliance command, and both the Phoenix and Massassi fleets positioned their forces to create an opening for Bridger's vessel. Leading the rebel forces in orbit, Commander June Sato of the Phoenix Home began to employ a complex defensive tactic native to the Danaan system. This tactic involved surgical bomber attacks directed at the flanks of enemy warships, and intended to goad these vessels into breaking formation, while small groups of frigates and corvettes provided close fire support for mission-critical vessels, in this case the Nightbrother. Having been naturally aware of this tactic, Grand Admiral Thrawn gave explicit orders to his subordinate, Admiral Cassius Constantine, to maintain the battle line at all costs, refusing to allow his ships to be drawn out of formation by Sato's tactics. Personally leading the elite A-Wing pilots of Phoenix Squadron from the cockpit of her vessel the Ghost, Captain Syndulla began to escort the Nightbrother toward the edge of the engagement zone. Simultaneously, the Y-Wings of Green Squadron departed the Phoenix Home to begin the various bombing runs demanded by Sato's defensive tactics. These attacks resulted in heavy losses for Green Squadron and prompted a counterattack by Imperial bombers, which succeeded in destroying 2 CR-90s, as well as a Hammerhead corvette and the Brahatok-class gunship Orion. Thrawn then executed an envelopment maneuver using his 2 light cruisers. These vessels succeeded in blocking the escape of the Nightbrother and its escorts, forcing those vessels to abandon their mission and begin shielding the larger rebel warships from starfighter attack. By the time the 2 light cruisers reached their new positions, they had inflicted even further damage on Green Squadron, eliminated yet another Corellian corvette, and destroyed a second Nebulon B frigate. As the Alliance's situation became increasingly hopeless, Commander Sato of the Phoenix Cell elected to sacrifice himself and his vessel in a final attempt to allow the Nightbrother to escape. Evacuating the majority of the Phoenix Home's crew, Sato pushed his vessel to full speed in what appeared to be an attempted retreat. As Sato had predicted, Admiral Constantine broke from formation in the hopes of intercepting the command ship before it could escape, but as Constantine's interdictor bore down on the fleeing rebel ship, Sato made his final move, bringing the Phoenix Home into a sharp about turn and ramming the Imperial warship as it attempted to change course. With Sato's sacrifice having created a brief opportunity to escape, Captain Syndulla ordered the Nightbrother Brother to make the jump to hyperspace, and the vessel began its journey to summon reinforcements. But the destruction of the Phoenix home had broken the back of the rebel defensive formation. Thrawn's fleet surged forward, bringing down the frigate Vanguard beneath heavy fire, and forcing General Dodonna and his staff to flee to the escape pods. With the battered remnants of the rebel flotilla spread across the region, Captain Syndulla was left with no choice but to order a full retreat to the surface of Atollon, leaving the Imperial fleet to establish a full blockade over the planet. Having forced what remained of the rebel fleet to ground, Thrawn began to bombard the planetary shields of the Alliance base from orbit, before deploying ground forces to the surface of Atollon in the hopes of capturing high-profile members of the Alliance leadership. A fierce ground and aerial battle was fought around the rebel base for some time, until eventually the rebels received word that Lieutenant Commander Bridger had returned. With Alliance command having been unable to divert forces from other rebel systems, Commander Bridger had instead contacted the Alliance's Mandalorian allies from House Wren, who had donated a squadron of Fang-class starfighters to the operation, as well as a team of Mandalorian commandos to be carried aboard the Night Brother. Recognizing their only chance of escape, the Alliance forces on the surface boarded their ships and began to return to low orbit, suffering serious losses to ground fire as they fled the burning facility. Though also suffering some casualties, the Mandalorian fighter squadron led by Fen Rao, the legendary protector of Concord Dawn, succeeded in holding off an Imperial fighter attack long enough for the Night Brother to deploy its commandos onto the surface of the last remaining Imperial interdictor. Fighting on the dorsal hull of the Imperial warship, the Mandalorians of House Wren succeeded in overloading the gravity well generators of the final interdictor and ultimately destroying the vessel. Meanwhile, what remained of Phoenix Squadron, accompanied by the few surviving Alliance warships, rendezvoused with their Mandalorian allies and began a fighting retreat through the Imperial blockade. By the time they had fled the engagement zone, the rebels had suffered even greater losses, and though the Alliance ultimately escaped the system, their fleet had been utterly decimated. Though it failed to completely neutralize the local rebel presence, the Battle of Atollon was undoubtedly a decisive victory for the Galactic Empire. In one swift stroke, Thrawn had delivered a mortal blow to the rebellion, eliminating the entirety of General Dodonna's fleet and inflicting such serious losses among the Phoenix Cell that the fleet was disbanded as an Alliance military unit. In the final accounting, only 5 rebel starships escaped the battle: the Night Brother, Ghost, Lightmaker and Liberator, as well as a second Hammerhead-class corvette, and though approximately 2,700 rebels had been present at the start of the battle, roughly 400 escaped the system alive. Thank you all for watching this week-long collaboration event, and my thanks to Fact Free and Star Wars Explained for all their work on this project. If you missed either of the previous 2 parts, you can find them linked below this video, and if you'd like to see more battle analyses and spacecraft breakdowns, why not subscribe to my channel, Spacedock, where a new video is released every Tuesday and Friday.